This time we'll be covering the Annotation Arrow Settings component, and after watching this video you will know how to edit your annotation arrows parametrically through Grasshopper. The component can be found in the Rhino tab's Annotations section. Let's get to examples. We are again expanding on our previous script. You can find the annotation dimension settings and the annotation unit settings explained in previous videos. This time we'll be focusing here. We can start editing our arrow settings by connecting the component to the align dimension component's arrow settings input. Now let's look at the component itself. Our first two inputs are for selecting the arrow style that we wish to be used. I have extracted the parameter from here and used the same style for both of the arrows. You can right-click on the container and you can set arrows to the style that you want to use. For individual styles, you can right-click on the component's input and set arrows here. I want a uniform style, so I will connect the container to the input again. You also have the user block option, but it has some issues, so I will get back to it later in this video. Our next input changes the arrow size as the name suggests. With our next input, you can change how the arrows are fitted into the dimension lines. You can set it to 0 for automatic fit. This means that the component will automatically change the arrows to the inside or the outside of the extension line depending on the space on the inside of the extension lines. You can set this to 1 to force the arrows on the inside or to 2 to force the arrows on the outside. I will put this back to automatic. The dimension inline input is a Boolean value which changes if the inline is displayed when the arrows are on the outside. If I set it to true, the inlines will always be visible, and if I set it to false, the inlines are not visible. So if I force the arrows on the outside, this will also lose its dimension line. I like the inlines visible, so I will set it to true. Our last two inputs are for leader arrows. You can change their style and size as you could change the dimension arrow style and size here in the first three inputs. Let's get back to the arrow styles. If I right-click on the arrow container and set this to the user block, our arrows will disappear. Now there is no option to edit the user block in question or add new styles here. The naming would suggest that you could connect a block definition or search the block definitions by name, but this is not the case. When you select the user block option, this component is going to use the user block selected in the annotation options of Rhino model. So if we go to the options and navigate to our selected annotation style and to the arrow section, we can change the arrowheads to user arrow. Here you can select the arrowhead from your model block definitions. I have created another Rhino file to store my arrow style. Here I am using the import model block definition component to get my custom arrow, and then I have pushed it into the content cache. This makes it an usable block definition in my Rhino model. Now let's get back to the options and change these to user arrows, and I am now using the custom arrow defined here. Now I have applied the changes. Now if we zoom out, we can find our dimension arrows here. Their scaling is a bit messed up. If I start editing this size, the arrowheads will disappear completely. This has to be due to a bug of some sort. Now I will disconnect the arrow size input. This will allow us to edit the arrow sizes through the Rhino menu. Here is a montage of me trying to get the scaling to work, but it simply refuses every effort that I try. You also need to keep refreshing it by toggling between another arrow style and the user block style. In my opinion, there are enough arrow styles anyway, so I don't see a point in doing this. There just seems to be no logic with the arrow sizing and no way to reliably keep the size set to what you want it to be. So I definitely do not recommend using the user arrows. That is all for this video. I hope you learned something, and if you did, like the video and subscribe to the channel.